All science is either physics or stamp collecting. Ernest Rutherford, winner of the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. Congratulations for clicking on this video. It's your mental health spiral. You get to choose the movie. How's it going, ladies? Welcome to yet another YouTube channel where a hot former physicist complains about things. I'm kind of insecure. The other two ladies in this niche have PhDs and I haven't even finished my master's. I'm just a bisexual garden gnome without parental supervision waiting to get caught. The physics bro. What a specimen, eh? I can't stop bumping into them. It's probably a divine curse. I've angered the gods by being too sexy, smart, and hilarious, and now I'm constantly surrounded by men who look like Jimmy Neutron. I'm not body shaming, I'm just body asking why. It's 2025, take off the fucking Bazinga t-shirt. You look silly. Not every physics student is a physics bro, of course. A lot of physics students are just content with considering physics their personal preference, and they can appreciate the beauty in every field of human knowledge. But the physics bro, gender neutral, derogatory, considers the physics superior to all the other sciences. Everything could be ultimately explained with just the behavior of fundamental particles, and therefore, physics explains the laws of the universe. And this is not just a vibe-based guess, okay? I have data to back up what I'm talking about. I'm sorry, I'm kind of insecure. I put a lot of effort into this project because, you see, a man left a comment saying,
"We'll give it a few vids and see what you have to offer, if anything."
And I'm really trying to impress him. After all, he has demonstrated to have excellent taste. He's into crypto. I bet he likes popular girls who bleach their hair blonde and wear makeup. Not like me. No one likes natural ginger girls who spend their Saturday night alone reading the classics. I don't think someone like you would be interested in someone like me.
Redacted.
Alright, I'm done clowning on this guy. Let's get to the video. Alright, third upload, and your girl's already doing original research. Let's go. You can definitely tell by the amount of effort that I'm putting into this channel that I am unemployed. Also, peep the outfit featuring shoes that can only be worn inside. POV, you wore Dr. Martens for more than 45 seconds outside. I wanted to investigate how students of various majors feel towards physics and science in general. I administered a questionnaire to 480 Italian people. Thanks for the help, folks. I asked them their age, gender, field of study, and how much they agree with various sentences on a scale from 1 to 5.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your pain?
And by the way, this channel is for the ladies, but my older channel, almost 80% men. Oh my god, and I still upload there regularly. Braver than the troops, really. If you want to take the questionnaire yourself, by the way, I made an English version and it's in the description, but you have to do it now. You have to pause the video and do it now, because the rest of this video might change your mind about some stuff. Don't go back and do it, because otherwise you'll screw up my results, and then I'll have no choice but to kill you. The sample was collected by asking my Italian followers to fill a questionnaire. Obviously, this sample is mostly followers of a YouTube channel that talks about physics, so the whole sample is probably going to have a, let's call it, pro-physics bias and pro-science bias in general. So this sample doesn't tell us a lot about the general tendency of the Italian population because it is quite self-selected. But even within this very small sample with giant-ass error bars, I'm so sorry, there are some really interesting findings, and I want to talk about them now. For example, STEM majors are more likely to agree with statements like, natural sciences contribute more to human knowledge than social sciences. Natural sciences should receive more funding than social sciences. Studying physics requires more intelligence than other sciences. Interesting, by the way, that engineers agree with this statement more than physicists. I guess you folks finally recognize that our cock is bigger. Better late than ever. You could think that this is just people rooting for their major, but that's not quite what's going on. If that were the case, you would expect social scientists to respond more positively to pro-social sciences statements, let's put it that way. But that doesn't really happen. Social sciences are slightly more likely than STEM majors to agree with the statement, social sciences are more important than natural sciences, but they don't even agree with it that much. They're even less likely to agree with it than art majors and people who didn't go to uni in the first place. Students from the soft sciences and humanities seem to have a more interdisciplinary approach. That's a really difficult word, interdisciplinary. 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 And they're more likely to agree with statements like collaboration between natural and social sciences leads to better discoveries. Scientists, on the other hand, are more likely to believe in the supremacy of science. Physicists and engineers, in particular, are more likely to believe in the supremacy of physics. This mentality is so emblematic of a very specific and very annoying type of guy in the physics department. It even appeared in an XKCD comics, which was making fun of the mentality in the first place. And you might be thinking, oh, that's just something that freshmen believe it, they all grow out of it. But no, that's actually what my boyfriend said when I was telling him about this video, and his objection is what led me to seek out data on this stuff. So thanks, babe, I love you so much. But that's not true. Again, if we take just people that studied physics and engineering, it seems like undergrads are a bit more snob than people who are doing their masters, but it's still a sentiment that goes up with age, not down. And if we consider the whole sample, this becomes even more evident. We have sentences like, physics explains the real world more than other sciences. Social sciences are too vague and subjective. If you understand physics, you understand all sciences. If anything, it feels like the social sciences are useless kind of mentality is a boomer thing, not a physics freshman thing. A particularly baffling example of this mentality is the book The Social Atom by theoretical physicist Mark Buchanan.
We should think of people as if they were atoms or molecules, following fairly simple rules and trying to learn the patterns to which those rules lead. Seemingly complicated social happenings may often have quite simple origins, and that we can discover such simplicity by examining how we too may be subject to laws not unlike those of physics. This book is an exploration of that idea and of a deep shift in science associated with it.
Mark Buchanan is a talented science author. I've recommended his work before, and I'm probably going to do it again. I want my writing to sound like his writing, even though probably to do that I would have to stop doing recreational Xanax. Despite Buchanan's talent, however, there is a very weird vibe to the way he talks about social sciences.
Many researchers carry out surveys and look for correlations between one thing and another. There is nothing wrong with this, but inquiry often stops here without exploring in detail how the actions of people may bring about the pattern, without seeking to bring the basic causal mechanism into view.
That's not really how sociology research works, I think.
Economists have another way of doing social science. The most common assumptions are that people are perfectly rational and infallible in their decision making and ruthlessly greedy in pursuing their selfish ends. This approach still gravely afflicts the profession.
Mark, are you gonna make me defend economists on God's internet? And then finally, there is the lunatic fringe of those social scientists who seem to prefer a grand style of thinking, unrestricted by any need to test those theories against reality. Nowhere is this more evident than the pervasively influential postmodernist school of thought, which said, okay, now we're just saying things. And this very specific vibe was not created by my boy Mark. It's not uncommon in the physics department. I would argue it's part of the culture of physics department.
I'm a physicist. I have a working knowledge of the entire universe and everything it contains.
Who's Radiohead?
According to this mentality, physics is superior to other sciences. More objective, more precise, more reliable, more intellectually challenging, more useful, more important, and therefore the methods that physics uses are objectively superior. If other sciences acted more like physics, they would be objectively better. But wait, isn't that kind of true? Like, yeah, Buchanan's book is a bit weird about sociology, but it is also filled with examples in which social scientists took a rule or two from the playbook of physics and got wonderful results from it. I make a lot of fun of physics bros, and I will continue to do that because it's God's work, but aren't they low-key kinda cooking? This isn't just freshmen with a superiority complex. There's a deeper argument here. Strap in, ladies, we're doing philosophy. It's time to think.
You can't make me. Thinking is gay in communism.
Does reality exist? Chat, is this real? Regardless of how stoned you are right now, when you are doing science, whether it's designing experiments, constructing a theory, or cursing the bacteria colony in your lab for not being adequately horny, you're operating under the pretense that, yes, reality does indeed exist. In fact, when you're doing science, you implicitly believe a lot of things about reality. For example, that reality exists outside of you and it's not just an illusion or a dream or something like that. That reality will behave in the future similarly to how it behaved in the past. That we can learn things about this reality through our theories and experiments, and many more. There's a whole set of assumptions about how reality is and what we can know about it. And these assumptions guide and legitimize our scientific scientific pursuits. In other words, if reality wasn't real, it wouldn't make that much sense to do science in the first place. Every science has an underlying metaphysics and epistemology, assumptions about what is reality and what we can know about this reality. One of such assumptions is that if we wanted to understand something, it's useful to open up that something. Metaphorically speaking, please don't do this with animals. We want to look inside that something and understand what are the individual parts of that something and how those parts work together to create the whole. For example, if we want to understand the behavior of an atom, we can break it down into the nucleus and the electrons, and then we can look at the property of the nucleus and then the properties of the electrons, and by understanding the properties of the parts, we understand the properties of the whole. This process of breaking down things into parts has a name.
Reductionism is the view that the ultimate scientific understanding of a range of phenomena is to be gained exclusively from looking at the constituents of those phenomena and their properties.
Reductionism is at the heart of all scientific processes. It's everywhere. It's so Julia.
Like, what does it mean to be so Julia?
Just being that bitch.
This creates a particular relationship between the domains of science. For example, scientists that study the structure of a cell will break it down into parts, smaller and smaller, until they get to the molecules. So to explain the system, we break it down into parts. The cell is the system, and the molecules are the parts. And the cell is the domain of biology, while the molecules are the domain of chemistry. So because biology studies the system and chemistry studies the part, there is a sort of asymmetry between the fields of biology and chemistry, because biology relies on chemistry a lot more than chemistry relies on biology. This asymmetry creates a sort of hierarchy among the sciences, based on how complex are the objects of their study. Let's try to sketch out what this hierarchy looks like, so everyone can get mad at me in the comments. We're gonna go from top to bottom, like the sexuality of my followers. At the top level, what are called the fundamental sciences, physics and chemistry. I personally would put chemistry slightly below physics because they use quantum mechanics like more than we use their stuff, but they're still pretty fundamental. So let's just put them close to each other. Chemistry being a bit smaller to, of course, reflect penis size. Then we're gonna have biology, which uses chemistry and physics quite a lot. Then we're gonna have medicine, which uses biology quite a lot and like a little bit of physics and chemistry. Maybe this is also where you would put zoology or veterinarian science if you think those are separate. Then I would say psychology, which relies on medicine and biology, but like not so much on chemistry and physics. And then maybe this is where I would put the social sciences, like maybe economics and sociology and stuff like that. And then there's gonna be like other fields of human knowledge. We're focused on the sciences for now. Physics is the most fundamental of all sciences and therefore the most homosexual, believe it or not. I don't make the rules, I just follow them. It's the one science to which every other science could be reduced, at least in theory. So the flow of the development of science over time goes in this direction. And this argument that the flow of science goes in this direction over time is basically the argument put forward in 1958 by philosophers Paul Oppenheim and Hilary Putnam in their seminal paper, Unity of Science as a Working Hypothesis. Oh shit. It's behind a paywall. How am I ever going to read it? Soon may the wellman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the talking is done, we'll take a leave and go. Fuck a paywall, am I right, ladies? Let's hear what the article has to say. Any micro-reduction constitutes a step in the direction of unity of language in science. For if one scientific theory reduces another, the first theory explains everything that the second one does, and normally more besides. When the DNA was discovered, huge portions of the field of genetics became explainable with chemistry. And when quantum mechanics was discovered, huge portions of the field of chemistry became explainable with physics. So over time, as science progresses, we will be able to explain more and more things in terms of their fundamental constituents. We haven't obviously reached the level where we can explain everything just with one theory, but it's reasonable to think that we will eventually get there, because this is clearly the direction in which scientific research has gone so far.
The possibility that all science may one day be reduced to microphysics, in the sense in which chemistry seems today to be reduced to it, and the presence of a unifying trend toward micro-reduction running through much of scientific activity have often been noticed both by specialists in the various sciences and by meta-scientists.
Social groups are made of people, people are made of cells, cells are made of molecules, molecules are made of atoms, and atoms are made of quanta. So everything is made of quanta. This trend in the progress of science has taken the name of unity of science. You might have heard of theory of everything, which is not exactly the same concept, but very similar. And Oppenheim and Putnam say that this is not only reasonable, but also useful to science to go in this direction. So whatever, sure, physicists with a superiority complex are very annoying. They can be ignorant and short-sighted about other subjects, but Even if the vibes are rad, there is still something important about physics, more important than other sciences, because the entirety of science flows towards fundamental physics. So maybe it turns out that the physics bro are correct after all. Is there anyone who has any objections?
I'm John Dupré.
This is John Dupré.
I'm a professor of philosophy of science at the University of Exeter.
He's a professor of philosophy of science at the University of Exeter. I love this guy, by the way. He's one of those rare British intellectuals who actually understand the importance of making academia accessible to the general public. Just like, God bless this man. And for our collective delight, this means that there are a lot of videos of him discussing very dense and important philosophical topics in the most dark academia looking ass sets you've ever seen. Let's read what the comments say.
Diversity? Yes. Entitlement? No. This man is saying nothing, and for nothing he shall be known. Which one is more difficult than others in both of two laconic Rie and Heidegger being and time? Please answer. What are you talking about?
Professor, no! Pay no attention to these peasants, as opposed to them. I actually read your work. In his 1993 book, The Disorder of Things, John Dupré argues precisely against this general tendency of science. I love it when two really smart philosophers argue. This is the only debate I'm interested in, alright? It's incredibly entertaining. I'm sad. Dupré's fundamental argument is against unity of science. He does believe, of course, in the importance of science, but he doesn't think that it will be possible to reduce all science to the study of some fundamental particles. He points out that the fact that some theories have been reduced to others in the past is no sufficient evidence that this will continue indefinitely in the future. Believing that all observable things would be explained one day in terms of fundamental particles is an unprovable statement. Like, it's just based on vibes, you just made that up. This way of reasoning can sound plausible on a superficial level, but if we adopt it, physics is turned into the only tool that we have, the proverbial hammer, and that turns everything else into quantum nails. I wish I had quantum nails to make a joke about it. It's not just the problem of refining our experiments and our theories, and it's not just a matter of time before we will be able to express every phenomenon in terms of string theory or whatever acid trip you people come up with next time. His thesis is as simple as it is striking. The world is varied. The disunity of science is not merely an unfortunate consequence of our limited computational or other cognitive capacities, but rather reflects accurately the underlying ontological complexity of the world. The disorder of things. Our scientific theories are complex and diversified because the world is complex and diversified. This was not easy to digest for me. Intellectually, of course, because it's kind of dense philosophical topics, but also emotionally, frankly. I never really heard a good argument against theory of everything. I didn't even know there was a name for unity of science, I just thought of it as common sense. I've always assumed in the back of my mind that the general mission of science as a whole is to find one theory that is able to explain every single phenomenon in the universe. I guess I've always had as my personal metaphysics. And it wasn't emotionally trivial for me to let go of this hypothesis. Because we must admit, it's a very interesting cosmic narrative. It's a very heroic and enlightened view of science as a sort of like mankind's unifying mission. But first thing first, the fact that we don't have enough evidence that we will actually reach this theory of everything. I think theory of everything, it can be a useful pragmatic idea to adopt, at least for now, but there really is no rational motive to think that it is true. We just would like if it was. It's not that my belief was a lie, it's that my belief was a belief, not a reality, but an assumption about reality. But no matter how much we would like for this to be true, we don't have a lot of evidence. Maybe the world is not made of fundamental particles. Or maybe it is, but we will never be able to concretely explain everything just based on those fundamental particles. But the most important argument against unity of science is that physics is not really just a theory. It's not just a set of mathematical ideas, it's a way to look at the world. And through the filter of physics, some parts of reality, some aspects of reality are much more in focus than others. And other sciences are other ways to look at the world that see other things that physics is not as good at focusing on. When we ask other sciences to behave more like physics, we give up something. We give up those other things that those other sciences are better at focusing on. This grand narrative of humanity's mission is obviously very nice and comforting for a physicist, but it trivializes what other sciences bring to the table. The tendency that hard sciences have to invade the domains of soft sciences, and in particular, I would argue the tendency that physics has to invade the domains of all other sciences, John Dupré has named scientific imperialism, which is, we must admit, a very funny name. Different sciences have their own history, their own metaphysics, their own culture and mentality and moral code. So trying to apply the logic of physics to other sciences can sometimes lead to interesting results, but that's not really because physics is fundamentally different or better than other sciences. It's just because interdisciplinarity is a useful approach for any subject. Physics benefits from the input of other sciences just as much as the vice versa. And I think it's kind of important to question why some physicists resist this obvious fact so much. Why do we want to be superior to others so much? If we put curiosity into the driver's seat and we get rid of this former gifted kid, juvenile freshman smugness, we find so many new ways to look at the objects of our studies, to look at the world. And I think that that is more precious than the grand unified quest for a theory of everything. Also, y'all sound like you've never opened a philosophy book. Grow the fuck up.